tournament officials were working through the situation in real time. The venue had safety obligations. Capacity limits existed for a reason, but understanding the rules did not make the disappointment easier to accept. As match time approached, Eala focused on preparation. A professional athlete cannot control ticketing policies. She could only control what happened on the court. Yet those who saw her before the match said the issue remained on her mind. She carried it with her during warm-ups. She carried it with her onto the grass. And when she finally stepped onto center court, she carried it into every point. The crowd inside the venue was loud, passionate, supportive. But there was also an awareness that many supporters were missing. Many voices that wanted to cheer were standing outside. Many flags that wanted to wave never made it through the gates. Every applause felt a little different. Every celebration felt incomplete. Eala played with determination, perhaps even with extra purpose. Each winner drew roars from those fortunate enough to be inside. And somewhere beyond the walls of the club, supporters followed every point on phones, live streams, and score updates. Unable to enter, unwilling to leave. When the match ended, attention quickly shifted toward the post-match interview. The crowd expected the usual tennis questions: analysis, strategy, thoughts on the next round. Instead, Eala addressed something else. She thanked the fans inside the venue. Then she acknowledged those who couldn't be there. Those following from outside. Those watching from train stations, from nearby cafes, from hotel rooms, from anywhere they could find a signal. She told them their support mattered, that she felt it, that she appreciated every effort they had made. The statement lasted less than a minute. But for many supporters, it meant everything. The response spread rapidly across social media. Messages poured in from around the world. Not because of a forehand, not because of a ranking, not because of a result, because people felt seen. In modern sports, athletes often become symbols. Sometimes willingly, sometimes accidentally. What happened in Birmingham reminded everyone that behind the headlines and highlights, the connection between a player and her supporters can be remarkably personal. The tournament would continue. The matches would continue. The grass court season would continue. But the conversation had changed. The story was no longer just about wins and losses. It was about demand. It was about representation. It was about a fan base that had grown faster than anyone expected. And it was about a young player from the Philippines who understood exactly what that support meant. Whatever happened next in Birmingham, one thing had become impossible to ignore. The Alex Eala phenomenon was no longer arriving. It had arrived. Birmingham, England, June 4th, 2026, Edgbaston Priory Club, 8:15 p.m. The crowd should have been gone. The matches were over. The evening light stretched across the grounds of Edgbaston Priory Club, painting long shadows over the walkways and empty practice courts. Yet hundreds of people remained. Some stood quietly behind barriers. Others sat on suitcases and folded flags. Children leaned against their parents. Grandparents clutched programs and photographs. Nobody wanted to leave. Not yet. Because Alex Eala had just done something that no tournament official, television producer, or marketing executive could have planned. She had shown up. No cameras had been requested. No publicity team had arranged it. No sponsor had organized it. The top seed had simply walked to the gates because she heard her supporters were still waiting outside. And somehow, that mattered more than the victory itself. A woman from Liverpool wiped tears from her eyes as she watched Eala speak with fans through the barrier. "We came for the tennis," she said softly. "But this is why people love her." Nearby, a family from Glasgow nodded. Their 10-year-old daughter had spent 3 weeks making a homemade poster. She never got inside the venue. She never saw the match. But she saw Alex. And, to her, that was enough. As darkness slowly approached, tournament officials realized something important. The crowd wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't demanding refunds. It wasn't chanting. It was simply watching. Watching a young athlete stand beside a fence and spend time with people she had never met. One by one, Eala signed programs, signed flags, signed hats. She apologized repeatedly. Not because the situation was her fault, because she genuinely felt responsible for the disappointment they had experienced. "You don't have to apologize," one supporter told her. "We know you didn't do this." Eala smiled sadly. "I know," she replied, "but I still wish you could have seen the match." The word spread through the crowd. Some laughed. Some cried. Many did both. For years, Filipino tennis fans had supported players from a distance. They stayed awake through the night to watch. Birmingham, England, June 4, 2026. The celebration was supposed to continue. 24 hours earlier, Alex Eala had walked off center court after one of the most dominant performances of her grass court season. The top seed had dismantled her opponent, energized the crowd, and thanked the thousands of Filipino supporters who transformed Edgbaston Priory Club into something that felt closer to Manila than Birmingham. The message was simple: see you all tomorrow. Nobody imagined that tomorrow would begin with disappointment. Long before the first ball was struck on day 3 of the tournament, crowds had already formed outside the venue. Fans arrived carrying Philippine flags, homemade signs, and dreams of seeing their champion continue her run toward the title. Families traveled from London. Groups arrived from Manchester and Liverpool. Some had crossed borders. Others had crossed oceans. For many, this wasn't simply a tennis match. It was an opportunity to support a player who represented something bigger than rankings and scoreboards. As the morning progressed, however, concern began to spread through the lines outside the gates. Security personnel were stopping entry. Officials were directing spectators away from entrances. Rumors moved through the crowd faster than official information. Capacity had reportedly been reached. Additional spectators would not be admitted. At first, many assumed it was a misunderstanding. Then came the announcements. Then came the disappointment. Faces that had arrived full of excitement suddenly reflected disbelief. Parents tried to explain the situation to children clutching posters. Fans refreshed their phones looking for updates. Others pleaded with staff members, hoping exceptions might be made. None were. Inside the venue, tournament operations continued. Outside, frustration continued to grow. The atmosphere remained peaceful, but emotions were impossible to ignore. Many supporters had invested significant money and time to attend. Some had booked hotels. Others had taken time away from work. Many had planned their entire week around seeing Alex Eala play. Now, they faced the possibility of watching from outside the gates. News of the situation gradually filtered through the venue. Volunteers discussed it. Media members discussed it. Eventually, the information reached the players' area. At first, Eala's team thought the reports might be exaggerated. Large crowds were expected. Minor entry delays happen at sporting events. But as more details emerged, it became clear that the situation was real. Hundreds of supporters had been unable to enter. Perhaps more. The tournament's popularity had exceeded expectations. And many of those affected were people who had come specifically to support her. When Eala learned what had happened, those present later described a visible change in her expression. The joy from the previous day's victory disappeared. Not because she was angry, because she was concerned. Throughout her rise in professional tennis, she had often spoken about the importance of the Filipino community. The flags, the chants, the support, the sacrifices people made simply to be there. She understood what it meant when families traveled long distances to watch a match. She understood what it meant when someone spent money they could barely spare on a ticket. To her, those supporters were not background noise. They were part of the journey. Sources close to the team later recalled that Eala immediately began asking questions. How many people had been turned away? Had anyone received refunds? Were there alternative viewing areas? Could anything still be done? The answers were unclear. Tournaments in Europe. They followed live scores during work breaks. They celebrated victories through television screens and social media posts. Now, standing only a few feet away from the athlete who had inspired them, they felt something different. Connection. Not celebrity. Not fame. Connection. Inside the tournament offices, meanwhile, discussions had become increasingly urgent. Attendance figures were being reviewed. Security reports were being analyzed. Emails were being exchanged. Phone calls were being made. The Birmingham Open had anticipated strong crowds. It had not anticipated this. The numbers told only part of the story. What surprised officials most was the emotional intensity. People weren't attending simply because a top seed was playing. They were attending because they felt represented, because they felt invested, because they believed they were witnessing something historic. That kind of support is difficult to measure, and even harder to prepare for. By 9 p.m., the crowd had finally begun to thin. Families started heading toward train stations. Cars slowly pulled away from nearby parking lots. Flags were folded. Posters were packed away. The long day was ending. Before leaving, however, Eala made one final request. She asked tournament staff for a marker. Then she walked toward a large blank promotional board near the entrance. Hundreds of supporters watched. Without saying a word, she wrote a short message. To everyone who came today, thank you for believing. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for showing up. Laban always. Alex, the crowd erupted into applause. Not loud applause. Not stadium applause. Something softer. Something warmer. The kind of applause reserved for moments people know they will remember. Phones captured photographs. Videos recorded reactions. Children pointed excitedly. Parents smiled. And for a few brief minutes, the frustration of the day disappeared. The story was no longer about closed gates. It was about what happened after them. Later that night, as Eala finally returned to her hotel, her team sat quietly in the elevator. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Eventually, one member of her entourage broke the silence. You didn't have to do that. Eala looked down. Yes, she said. I did. The answer surprised nobody, because anyone who had watched her journey already knew. The rankings mattered. The trophies mattered. The victories mattered. But the people mattered too. Perhaps even more. As Birmingham prepared for the quarterfinals, the conversation surrounding the tournament had completely changed. Sports programs discussed fan culture. Journalists debated venue planning. Commentators analyzed the growing influence of Southeast Asian tennis. And throughout it all, one image continued spreading across social media. Not a forehand winner. Not a trophy ceremony. Not a match point. Just a young player standing behind a barrier, listening to the people who believed in her. The quarterfinal awaited. Another challenge. Another opponent. Another chance to move closer to the title. But whatever happened next on the grass courts of Birmingham, one thing was already certain. The strongest moment of the week had happened away from the baseline. It happened at a gate. It happened in a crowd. And it reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most important victories never appear on a scoreboard.